Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, Chapter 4. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripa tamam vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. Verse 170. That is called firm attachment to Lord Krishna. It is spotlessly pure like a clean cloth and has no stain. Purport. The author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita advises everyone to give up all engagements of sense gratification and, like the gopis, dovetail oneself entirely with the will of the Supreme Lord. That is the ultimate instruction of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. We should be prepared to do anything and everything to please the Lord, even at the risk of violating the Vedic principles or ethical laws. That is the standard of love of Godhead. Such activities in pure love of Godhead are as spotless as white linen that has been completely washed. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur warns us in this connection that we should not mistakenly think that the idea of giving up everything implies the renunciation of duties necessary in relation to the body and mind. Even such duties are not sense gratification. If they are undertaken in a spirit of service to Krishna. Verse 171. Therefore, lust and love are quite different. Lust is like a dense darkness, but love is like the bright sun. Verse 172. Thus, there is not the slightest taint of lust in the gopis' love. Their relationship with Krishna is only for the sake of his enjoyment. Verse 173. O dearly beloved, your lotus feet are so soft that we place them gently on our breast, fearing that your feet will be hurt. Our life rests only in you. Our minds, therefore, are filled with anxiety that your tender feet might be wounded by pebbles as you roam about on the forest path. Purport. This text is from Srimad Bhagavatam 10.31.19. This was spoken by the gopis when Krishna left them in the midst of the Rasa Lila. Verse 174. The gopis do not care for their own pleasures or pains. All their physical and mental activities are directed toward offering enjoyment to Lord Krishna. Verse 175. They renounced everything for Krishna. They have pure attachment to giving Krishna pleasure. Verse 176. O my beloved gopis, you have renounced social customs, scriptural injunctions, and your relatives for my sake. I disappeared behind you only to increase your concentration upon me. Since I disappeared for your benefit, you should not be displeased with me. This text is from Srimad Bhagavatam 10.32.21. It was spoken by Lord Krishna when he returned to the arena of the Rasa Lila. Verse 177. Lord Krishna has a promise from before to reciprocate with his devotees according to the way they worship him. Verse 178. In whatever way my devotees surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. Purport. Krishna was never ungrateful to the gopis, for as he declares to Arjun in this verse from Bhagavad Gita 4.11, which is Ye yatha mam prapadyante tam tathaiva bhajamyaham mam vartamanu vartante manushyaha partha sarvashah. He reciprocates with his devotees in proportion to the transcendental loving service they render unto him. Everyone follows the path that leads toward him, but there are different degrees of progress on that path, and the Lord is realized in proportion to one's advancement. The path is one, but the progress in approaching the ultimate goal is different. And therefore the proportion of realization of this goal, namely the absolute personality of Godhead, is also different. The gopis attained the highest goal and Lord Chaitanya affirmed that there is no method of worshipping God higher than that followed by the gopis. Verse 179. That promise has been broken by the worship of the gopis, as Lord Krishna himself admits. Verse 180. O gopis, I am not able to repay my debt for your spotless service even within a lifetime of Brahma. Your connection with me is beyond reproach. You have worshipped me, cutting off all domestic ties which are difficult to break. Therefore, please let your own glorious deeds be your compensation. Purport. This verse is from Srimad Bhagavatam 10.32.22. This was also spoken by Krishna himself when he returned to the gopis upon hearing their songs of separation. Napare aham nirvadya samyujyam swasadhu krityam vibudhaya ushapi vah ya ma bhajan durjaya geha shrinkhalaha samvrishchaya tadvaha pratiyatu sadhuna. Verse 181. Now whatever affection we see the gopis show for their own bodies, know it for certain to be only for the sake of Lord Krishna. Purport. The selfless love of Godhead exhibited by the gopis cannot have any parallel. We should not therefore misunderstand the carefulness of the gopis in their personal decoration. The gopis dressed themselves as beautifully as possible just to make Krishna happy by seeing them. They had no ulterior desires. They dedicated their bodies and everything they possessed to the service of Sri Krishna, taking it for granted that their bodies were meant for his enjoyment. They dressed themselves with the understanding that Krishna would be happy by seeing and touching them. Verse 182. The gopis think, I have offered this body to Lord Krishna. He is its owner and it brings him enjoyment. Verse 183. Krishna finds joy in seeing and touching this body. It is for this reason that they cleanse and decorate their bodies. Verse 184. O Arjun, there is no greater receptacles of deep love for me than the gopis who cleanse and decorate their bodies because they consider them mine. Purport. This verse is spoken by Lord Krishna in the Adi Puran. Verse 185. There is another wonderful feature of the emotion of the gopis. Its power is beyond the comprehension of the intelligence. Verse 186. When the gopis see Lord Krishna, they derive unbounded bliss, although they have no desire for such pleasure. Verse 187. The gopis taste a pleasure 10 million times greater than the pleasure Lord Krishna derives from seeing them. Purport. The wonderful characteristics of the gopis are beyond imagination. They have no desire for personal satisfaction. Yet when Krishna is happy by seeing them, that happiness of Krishna makes the gopis 1,000,000 times more happy than Krishna himself. Verse 188. The gopis have no inclination for their own enjoyment, and yet their joy increases. That is indeed a contradiction. Verse 189. For this contradiction, I see only one solution. The joy of the gopis lies in the joy of their beloved Krishna. Purport. The situation of the gopis is perplexing, for although they did not want personal happiness, it was imposed upon them. The solution to this perplexity is that Sri Krishna's sense of happiness is limited by the happiness of the gopis. Devotees at Vrindavan therefore try to serve the gopis, namely Radharani and her associates. If one gains the favor of the gopis, he easily gains the favor of Krishna, because on the recommendation of the gopis, Krishna at once accepts the service of a devotee. Lord Chaitanya therefore wanted to please the gopis instead of Krishna. But his contemporaries misunderstood him, and for this reason Lord Chaitanya renounced the order of householder life and became a sannyasi. Verse 190, when Lord Krishna sees the gopis, his joy increases and his unparalleled sweetness increases also. Verse 191, the gopis think Krishna has obtained so much pleasure by seeing me. That thought increases the fullness and beauty of their faces and body. Verse 192, the beauty of Lord Krishna increases at the sight of the beauty of the gopis, and the more the gopis see Lord Krishna's beauty, the more their beauty increases. Verse 193, in this way, a competition takes place between them in which no one acknowledges defeat. Verse 194, Krishna, however, derives pleasure from the beauty and good qualities of the gopis, and when the gopis see this pleasure, the joy of the gopis increases. Verse 195, therefore we find that the joy of the gopis nourishes the joy of Lord Krishna. For that reason, the fault of lust is not present in their love. Purport, by looking at the beautiful gopis, Krishna becomes enlivened, and this enlivens the gopis, whose youthful faces and bodies blossom. This competition of increasing beauty between the gopis and Krishna, which is without limitations, is so delicate that sometimes mundane moralists mistake these dealings to be purely amorous. But these affairs are not at all mundane, because the gopis' intense desire to satisfy Krishna surcharges the entire scene with pure love of Godhead, with not a spot of sexual indulgence. Verse 196, I worship Lord Keshava. Coming back from the forest of Vraja, he is worshipped by the gopis, who mount the roofs of their palaces and meet him on the path with 100 manners of dancing, glances, and gentle smiles. The corners of his eyes wander, his large black bees around the gopis. Purport, this statement appears in the Keshavashtaka 8 of the Stavamala compiled by Srila Goswami. Verse 197, there is another natural symptom of the gopis' love that shows it to be without a trace of lust. Verse 198, the love of the gopis nourishes the sweetness of Lord Krishna. That sweetness in turn increases their love, for they are greatly satisfied. Verse 199, the happiness of the abode of love is in the happiness of the object of that love. This is not a relationship of desire for personal gratification. Verses 200 and 201, whenever there is unselfish love, that is its style. The reservoir of love derives pleasure when the lovable object is pleased. When the pleasure of love interferes with the service of Lord Krishna, the devotee becomes angry towards such ecstasy. Purport, as mentioned above, the gopis are the predominated lovers and Sri Krishna is the predominator, the beloved. The love of the predominated nourishes the love of the predominator. The gopis had no desire for selfish enjoyment. Their feeling of happiness was indirect, for it was dependent on the pleasure of Krishna. Causeless love of Godhead is always so. Such pure love is possible only when the predominated is made happy by the happiness of the predominator. Such unadulterated love is exemplified when the lover deprecates her happiness if it hinders her from discharging her service. Verse 202, Sri Daruka did not relish his ecstatic feelings of love, for they caused his limb to become stunned and thus obstructed his serving of fanning Lord Krishna. Now this verse is from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 3.2.62, and Daruka is the Lord's chariot driver. Verse 203, the lotus-eyed Radharani powerfully condemned the ecstatic love that caused a flow of tears that hindered her sight of Govinda. Purport, this verse is also from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 2.3.54. Verse 204, furthermore, pure devotees never forsake the loving service of Lord Krishna to aspire for their own personal pleasure through the 5 kinds of liberation. A pure devotee of Krishna who loves him exclusively will flatly refuse to accept any sort of liberation, beginning from the merging with the body of the Lord and extending to the other varieties of liberation such as equality of form, opulence or abode, and the opulence of living near the Lord. Verse 205, just as the celestial waters of the Ganges flow unobstructed into the ocean, so when my devotees simply hear of me, their minds come to me, who reside in the hearts of all. Verse 206, these are the characteristics of transcendental loving service to Purushottam, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is causeless and it cannot be obstructed in any way. Verse 207, my devotees do not accept Shalokya, Sarshti, Sarupya, Samipya or oneness with me, even if I offer these liberations in preference to serving me. These three verses from Srimad Bhagavatam 3.29, 11 to 13 were spoken by Lord Krishna in the form of Kapil Dev. My devotees, this is verse 208, my devotees have fulfilled their desires by serving me, do not accept the 4 kinds of salvation that are easily earned by such service. Why then they should accept any pleasure that are lost in the course of time? Purport. This verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 9.4.67 was spoken by the Lord in connection with the characteristics of Maharaj Ambarish. Merging into the existence of the Lord Absolute is as temporary as living in the celestial kingdom. Both of them are controlled by time, neither position is permanent. Verse 209, the natural love of the gopis is devoid of any trace of lust. It is faultless, bright and pure, like molten gold. Verse 210, the gopis are the helpers, teachers, friends, wives, dear disciples, confidants, and serving maids of Lord Krishna. Verse 211, O Partha, I speak to you, the gopis are my helpers, teachers, disciples, servants, friends, and consorts. I do not know what they are not to me. Purport, this verse was spoken by Lord Krishna in Gopi Premamrita. Verse 212, the gopis know Krishna's desire and they know how to render perfect loving service to his enjoyment. For his enjoyment, they perform their service expertly for the sake of their satisfaction of their beloved. Verse 213, O Partha, the gopis know my greatness, my loving service, respect for me, my mentality. Others cannot really know these. Purport, this verse was spoken by Lord Krishna to Arjuna in the Adi Puran. Verse 214, among the gopis, Srimati Radhika is the foremost. She surpasses all in beauty, in good qualities, in good fortune, and above all in love. Purport, among all the gopis, Srimati Radharani is the most exalted. She is the most beautiful, the most qualified, and above all, the greatest lover of Krishna. Verse 215, just as Radha is dear to Lord Krishna, so her bathing place Radha Kund is dear to me. She alone is the most beloved of all gopis. Purport, this verse is from Padma Purana. Verse 216, O Partha, in all the 3 planetary systems, this earth is especially fortunate. For on earth is the town of Vrindavan, and there the gopis are especially glorious because among them is my Srimati Radharani. Purport, this verse spoken by Lord Krishna to Arjuna is cited from Adi Purana. So we'll continue from here onwards next time. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.